Sponsored by Chartered Financial Strategies. You are now watching Tax Bytes.
Okay, welcome to another edition of Tax Bytes. I'm Sean Monahan with Chartered Financial Strategies, and today is probably going to do a little bit of, I won't say wrapping up, but at least pulling together a little bit of our federal top line budget concept of what do we spend, where does our money go. This is going to bring together that concept I think in the last video, or one of the last videos in the series, was the mandatory versus discretionary spending. And this is the budget process. The appropriations process, which you'll hear in the press and so forth, is where they take that discretionary portion, non-mandatory portion of what we spend in the federal government, and hash out between Congress, Senate, House, and the President what gets budgeted. And the first thing you got to understand is the budget year really starts October 1st. It's not January 1st to December 31st. It's an October 1st to September 20th or 30th. And this process starts, I think, February 1 or early February. And the best place, by the way, this is a very convoluted process. I found the best place I can find to kind of give us a snapshot of it, but it's incredibly convoluted. Even just getting a total number of the budget is very difficult from the federal government. But this is at usa.gov/budget is kind of where this kind of layout is. And it just says we start the new fiscal year. Here are your 4 quarters, October through November, December is 1 quarter, January through March, so forth. And right in that February timeframe is when you start the president, his agencies, and actually his agencies probably work on an 18-month forecasting period of what their needs are going to be. And they hand over to the president some kind of proposal needs, and he hands his proposal to Congress. And then Congress will have their Senate committees and House committees discuss or their budgetary needs, and each has their own rules, and they'll break out into multiple bills. For example, House has 12 subcommittees underneath the House and Ways Committee, the Budget Committee, and they break out into 12 different bills what their funding needs are. It's going to be science and technology, judicial systems, or whatever, or Department of Justice, whatever, and they break down each bill into this. This process then gets consolidated between Senate and House in its other process to reconcile that. And eventually it gets sent to the president for signing. This is the footballing back and forth. We see the passing back, the jargon, the politics that goes on. And they'll call it the bill, the budget, but it really can be one of many bills they're debating over. And in fact, in many cases, they'll portray that a government's going to get shut down. You may have 11 of 12 bills passed, and there's one small area that the government may not function if you don't get to a certain point and sign the bill. So that is kind of a misconception of the budget process. Is, oh, the government's going to shut down. Well, it may be, national parks doesn't open up come such and such day. Exaggerating a little bit, but that is a lot of what happens. Is you'll have a largely funded event, and we're just politicking over this small piece. And both sides do it. I'm not really picking anybody. It just happens to be a more Democrat issue of late than anything else. And so the point I'm getting to is that appropriation process with all that effort can go from February all the way into December. And you'll have where October 1 you don't have funding in theory for the new fiscal, and you have these things called continuing resolutions that get signed to fund for another 30 days or whatever. Those are stopgap measures, and guess what? You finally get something signed in December, and you start the process all over again in about 2 months. And this is a large amount of effort and work to fund what? And this is the hard part. I've tried to find it. I've tried to find how much money this entire process deals with. The appropriations process only deals with roughly $1.4 trillion. 1.2, 1.6, 1.4. But remember, we spend 4.5-ish and collect 3.5-ish in revenue. Spend 4.5, collect 3.5. But the appropriations process is only dealing with 1.4-ish of what we're spending. And that therein is a broken system is what I'm trying to highlight. It's broken. That's that discretionary versus mandatory. And in the prior video, I talked about 65% Social Security, Medicare being the largest parts of it, as well as other income support efforts. are entitlement, as some call it, mandatory as others call it, type programs. And those are funded automatically. They're not really a part of this process. So I think we said 65%, 2.8 trillion, somewhere in that range, of our 4.5 related to that kind of effort. A budget process will never be fiscally responsible when you're only dealing with the negotiation and controls around roughly 30-35% of what you spend. That's just not going to fix anything. It's never going to be fiscally responsible. It's never going to stop the excessive spending or control spending. So that is, if you grasp that and you see all that going back and forth, this is not a partisan issue. One is less or more. I mean, you could argue that the process has to be fixed by both parties coming together and saying this has to be fixed. We cannot have a process like this anymore. It becomes a very politicized effort. So the biggest takeaway I want you to understand today is the appropriations process only deals with about 35%, 30-35% of our annual government spend. And it's typically at discretionary. And that's the government. That's really the executive branch. Does the Department of Justice have a budget this year? Does the IRS have a budget this year? Does the EPA have a budget this year? Social Security Administration, whoever. And that's to operate. That's not necessarily to cut Social Security checks or Medicaid checks, Medicare checks. It's really related to, does that employee go to work that day? Is there funding for that? That becomes the appropriation process. And versus a process that says, let's look at the 4.5 million and see how we can cut and bring it down to 3.5 million, trillion, say not million, but trillion, and so forth. That process isn't very apparent, if it at all. So that's the biggest tax bite for today is when you look at the press and you're seeing whether one party's beating up on another, they both need to come together and fix this and say we're never going to be fiscally responsible. So that's the tax bite. I hope it's not too convoluted. I've tried to find something a little more straightforward. It's not. This is a very convoluted process. So I hope you learned something and you take this little bit away. And thank you for listening and have a good day.